Welcome to another episode of The Brand Called You, a podcast and podcast show that brings you leadership lessons, knowledge, experience, and wisdom from thousands of successful individuals from around the world. I'm your host, Ashutosh Garg, and today I'm delighted to welcome a respected and a best-selling author from Florida, USA, Mr. Robert Wolfe. Rob, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure, and I'm honored, and I much appreciate it. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Thank you. Rob is an author of a book titled Not a Real Enemy, The True Story of a Hungarian Jewish Man's Fight for Freedom. So, Rob, we're going to be talking only about your book today. What inspired you to finally write your father's story and turn it into Not a Real Enemy?
Well, the key word in that question is finally, and there's no doubt about it.
Yeah.
I've never been much of a big writer. I mean, I wrote back in medical school, residency, fellowship, under the guidance of certain professors because they would have case reports or a series of patients to trials, that kind of thing. But it was always under. Although in high school, this comes up from time to time. My partner and I, we wrote a sports column in high school, and we actually won an award in the state of
Wow.
Michigan for that. But
Mhm.
a long time ago. But my writing career was absolutely nil until I read my dad's manuscript for the second time in the 70s. Well, he wrote it in the 70s, my mom and dad. That's kind of the history of the
Mhm.
book. They went from paper and pencil to typewriter to computer to disc. And my mom passed away. Well, my dad passed away, unfortunately, in 1997, almost 30 years ago. Wow. And my mom, 2016. And then a historian friend handed me the disc. Now the story was on the disc, my dad's own memoirs, his own autobiography. And they wrote it as though it happened the previous day. It was very crisp, it was clean, and the details were there. And when I read it, this was probably the second time. The first time I read it 30 years ago, I finally got to read it in 2018, a couple years after my mom passed away. And I went back to work as a radiologist. And between reading cases, I started looking at my dad's story and said, "Oh my God, the miracles in this book, the lessons, the messages, the escapes, a four-time escape artist." 20 miracles. I couldn't believe it. And I thought, well, this cannot stay on a computer. This can't stay on a disk. I need to share this with people.
Incredible.
And with the backdrop of anti-Semitism throughout and clear messages there.
Wow. Fascinating. And at what time did you realize that your family's experiences were not just personal memories, but an important piece of history?
Well, it's a good question, and it's a combination. I mean, our book is a combination. It's a biography about my dad, of course. It's a history of little-known Hungary from
Mhm.
the end of World War I to the end of the Hungarian Revolution in 1956. Not a lot of people know about that war. And it was just well integrated. The way my dad wrote the stories,
Mhm.
he wrote them as they had happened the previous day, and he included a lot of the history. We checked. We had to verify a lot of things. We had to change a few things because it wasn't 100% perfect. But my dad was right there. I mean, for the most part. We also had the history verified by several beta readers, including a retired historian from the United States Holocaust Memorial Museum in D.C. And the three testimonials, outstanding testimonials we have in the book, were all professors in the know about the history. So any corrections and tweaks that they made, we sort of adjusted within the book. So we really did our homework. But yeah, it was the biography was relevant, the treatment of the Jewish people, and we'll talk more about that, just
Yeah,
judging by
yeah,
what your
yeah.
questions might be. But
So tell me, who was Irvin Wolfe beyond the extraordinary events you've described in your book?
well, he's an amazing guy. I mean, as we say here in the United States, he was a badass. I mean, he
Okay.
was a cool guy. I mean, before my dad was my hero since I was a little kid. He used to take me to the YMCA to go swimming and ice cream. And this is after working 50, 60-hour weeks as an OBGYN. That's the punchline. My dad became an OBGYN finally after doing two residencies, one in Hungary, one in Boston, and he delivered 10,000 babies in the Detroit
Wow.
area. So it's some kind of redemption. It doesn't bring back the 50 to 60 million people that perished in World War II, never mind under the communist regime in Eastern Europe and elsewhere. But it is a form of redemption. And my dad was jovial and jolly and no sign of PTSD. He was very pleasant to be around. My friends loved him. He had tons of friends in India, in Africa, China, Hong Kong, all over the world, and
Amazing.
Muslim, Christian, Jewish, Holocaust survivors, history lovers, just love people. And then that's how I remember him. And just
Fascinating.
if you don't have good parents, if you don't have a good family, you've got nothing. And I was
Absolutely.
lucky to have all that. So yeah, and that was even before, without knowing all this that happened to him in his memoirs.
Amazing. What personal qualities enabled your father to survive both Nazi persecution and communist oppression?
Well, that's a great question too. First of all, I ask myself, and any reader would ask themselves, how would I survive this? How would I make it through that? I'm not sure I could. I'm not sure that
Mm,
I'd be able to, because we are pretty coddled in today's world for the most part. I mean, we're
correct.
lucky we've got, but yeah, determination was one thing. Hope, determination, some prayer, friendship, resilience, and discipline. I mean, my dad was beaten as a kid. I didn't realize that until I read this. My dad was beaten by his father sometimes for being late or for his academics being underachieving. So those kind of things I think help. Even though my dad was sort of a spoiled kid because his dad was a dentist, his dad had to struggle for quite a while before my dad was even born.
Mm,
Even though he was a captain on a ship in the Red Cross, all this during World War One. I mean, real threats to society end up perishing in Auschwitz. But
mm,
my dad's focus, my his guts, his brains, and the luck, just the luck of it too. I mean, just things fell his way. And of course, risk tolerance is a thing we talk about too. His risk tolerance just kind of went up over time because you either escape, you survive, or you don't. And I'd hate for any of us to be put in that kind of position, but he
mhm.
was and amazingly got through it.
Very interesting. Rob, many people know about the Holocaust, but less about the fate of Hungarian Jews. Why is this story so important today?
Well, I'm bringing to light my little corner of the awareness of the Holocaust, the awareness of anti-Semitism, the awareness of genocide and hate. Um, I mean, people in Europe, people in Hungary, historians, obviously they're going to know what happened in Hungary. But for the
Mm,
average person, like even me, I mean, before I delved into this adventure, I had no idea what the history was. Um, so yeah, I mean, 825,000 Hungarians prior to World War II, about 565,000 perished. So the vast majority were gone. Countless persecuted. We don't even talk about the shooting at the Danube. About 21,000 people killed. You know, one person is too much. We talk about all these statistics,
mm,
and one person's too much, and we talk about thousands and millions of
yeah,
people.
yeah.
But little known Hungary was just that. The Hungarian Revolution in 1956. Not a lot of people knew about that. It was a 2 week war. 3,000 people died, countless refugees and injuries. My mom and dad, my dad was already a doctor by then. He was a frontliner, had to double down as a surgeon, a trauma surgeon, and my mom was a med student, so she ran the blood bank. Those kind of things in history. I mean, that's personal history, but my dad told a story of how the communists overran the rebelling Hungarians, and then even before that, the communists did not treat the Jews much better than the Nazis in a different way, short of
Mm,
corralling them into
yeah.
town squares and hauling them off to death camps. They weren't much better. There's persecution too. So Hungary didn't get much of a break in the 20th century. We'll put it that way.
Yeah.
And what's going on today, I'm sure you're going to ask me, is similar to then, just in different ways. The song remains the same.
Yeah. Yeah. I've been to Auschwitz-Birkenau at least two, maybe three times. But for my viewers and listeners, can you help us understand the scale of what happened to Hungarian Jews in 1944?
Well, that's it. I mean, like you said, and thank you for going. I don't even know if I could go. Like if I visit a Holocaust museum, I have hard time just getting into the
Yeah.
trains
Yeah.
because my dad's parents were taken to Auschwitz in packed trains, and eyewitness recounts of what happened to my dad's parents, which is amazing. That's another miracle in the
Mm,
book that my dad found out months later after the war. Yeah, I mean, but besides the death, the persecution, the rise of anti-Semitism in the 30s, the Jews were not allowed to shop at certain hours. No, they couldn't have a car. It turned out my dad got kicked off the swim team for being Jewish. His father he had a government job as a dentist. They kicked him out for being Jewish. They fired him. No pension, no benefits. They really had to struggle even before World War II.
mm,
And then World War II, like you said, it hit Hungary hardest in 1943, 1944.
yeah.
My dad was hauled off to a forced labor camp, which isn't talked about much. We talk about death marches in the Pacific, but we don't talk about death marches with the forced laborers, which was definitely a thing. My dad thought he was on a death march before his first escape, and therefore he escaped with his friend Frank. So these are side stories within the big story. My dad was useful because he was a young man and able to work, and so that probably saved his life. Even though many forced laborers were killed, or I mean, only 5% survived in Hungary. It's another statistic that not a lot of people know about, and most of them were treated as prisoners of war, even though they were never armed. My dad
Mm,
was escaped. He was on the run or in hiding, so he wasn't part of that mass.
Wow. Rob, your book deals not only with Nazism, but also with communist oppression. Why has it been important to tell both stories?
Well, that's the unique part of this book is that we continue. A lot of Holocaust books are memoirs. We keep it within just that part of that part of life. But my dad was he couldn't believe it. I mean, out of the frying pan into the fire. The communists they persecuted the Jews. You couldn't have a Jewish wedding, for example. My
Mm,
mom and dad snubbed that. They did one anyway, and it was sad for their host, my mom's uncle Lutzi. The Lutzi was his Hungarian name. He was the chief of surgery at a Budapest hospital, and they hauled him off to jail. They hauled the KGB was at there was a insider, a KGB attending their wedding, and when my mom and dad were on their honeymoon, this is 1953 under Stalin. They so it wasn't pretty, and they tortured this poor man. He was a physician. He was respected in the community. They
mm,
tortured him for a year, and they tried to get him to confess to the Raoul Wallenberg murder. And I'm sure he wasn't the only one.
yeah.
As you know, the doctor's plot to kill Stalin was sort of in that time frame. Too, Stalin was starting to lose his mind, and he was very paranoid. And in the end, the communists did not treat people like people. It was still an
Mm,
oligarchy,
yeah.
and short of just murdering everybody systematically,
Mm,
it was almost better to not be alive. I mean, and that's when my mom and dad had enough after that second war that they had to endure. They said enough is enough. They wanted to be free people. They wanted to practice medicine, but they also wanted to be in a free country. And I don't blame them.
yeah.
Look around
Yeah.
in North Korea and Cuba and China. It's still, and Iran. I mean, it's not communist, but it's a
Correct. Correct.
totalitarianism.
Correct.
I'm probably
Correct. Very
pronouncing
well
that
said.
incorrectly.
I
Yeah,
agree
it's
with you
horrible.
completely.
It's a horrible way of life.
Absolutely. Tell me, what similarities did your father see between fascist and communist systems?
Well, that's just it. If you were a Jew, you were screwed. I mean, that's how I put it.
Mm,
And even back to World War One, Admiral Horthy was a World War One. He was a World War One hero, but he was anti-Semitic. And then they had the Red Terror and the White Terror. You literally needed a program to see who was in charge of the Hungarian country at the time. Never mind the anatomy, never mind the geography being changed around. But the Jews always felt that they were underprivileged, that they were persecuted, that no matter who was in charge the Nazis, the communists, and everybody in between. And the truth of the matter is, the Hungarian government and the Hungarian police treated the Hungarian Jews worse than the Nazis did, and with pleasure, with sadism, with propaganda,
yeah.
and hence the Danube shootings. It was just it's so unbelievable that all these guns are pointed at these people just because of their religion. And that's what I'm here for. I guess this is
Wow.
my charge is to talk about this and
Yeah.
say, look, let's not let it happen again, at least not in your country, in my country, but any country. I mean,
Correct.
people don't deserve to be treated like that. No
Correct.
way.
Correct. Correct. Rob, your book talks about your father escaping oppression multiple times. Which escape story do you think best captures his character?
Well, that's a tough one because,
They
like I
all do.
said, his that's a tough one because all four of his escapes were amazing. I mean, split second timing, a lot of courage, a lot of brains.
Hmm.
The hand of God, I like to think, that's. But his first one is the one I remembered the first time I read the manuscript. Out in the middle of nowhere, they thought they were on a death march. They knew the war was coming to an end, and he and his friend Frank thought, we're not going to get killed out here in the middle of nowhere. And by the way, my dad had a foot infection. So he was hobbling along on a bad foot as well. I mean, and he just got out of the hospital where his doctor said to me, "Well, it doesn't matter if I treat your foot or not. You're going to be dead soon anyway." If you can believe
Hmm.
that, can you imagine your doctor saying that to you? So my dad and his friend Frank, they had about a 3 day window, and boom, they said let's take off. They took off at dusk, and it's an amazing story. If
Hmm.
cold, snow, guards chasing after them. A third guy chases after them. The guy got caught, so you can imagine hiding in the thicket and listening to this guy get hauled back to his platoon or whatever you want to call it. And meanwhile, and then there's no light at the end of the tunnel. You don't know where you're going. They escaped. They made it to Budapest eventually, but you don't know where your next meal is going to be, where you're going to sleep, if you're going to work again, if you're going to have money again. So you escape from point A, but you don't know. There's no light at the end of the tunnel. So to me, I put myself in that place and say, again, how could I survive that? And people that read about that escape. And then his last escape was kind of his signature with my mom. They both had it. They would not align with the Nazis or the communists. They'd had it with the two wars. Communists won, and they said, enough is enough. We're going to leave.
Hmm.
And my mom's mom and stepfather wanted him to go to Israel at the time, 1956. They were in Vienna, and my mom and dad said, "Nope, they're in the Sinai War, and 2 wars was enough. We don't need a third war." Now, Israel actually thrived, as you know,
Yeah.
beyond that, but back at the time, they said the United States will bust, and so that's and
Amazing.
if the Americans had won in Hungary rather than the communists, we probably wouldn't be having this conversation. I'd probably have been raised in Hungary. If I was lucky, go to medical school in Hungary. I'm a radiologist,
Mm,
as I might have said,
mm.
and lived happily ever after there as a democratic society. And only now they're finally getting a taste of that, after
Correct.
many, many decades. So
Correct.
yeah,
Absolutely.
so those the first and the last escape, but all four were
Absolutely.
unbelievable.
I agree. Next question for you. What did freedom mean to your father after everything he had endured? How did your parents build a new life after escaping Hungary? And I know you said they're both doctors.
Yeah, that's well, my mom never made it. She was about a year away from graduation, unfortunately.
Mhm.
They were blessed. I mean, I don't think I could know anybody more appreciative of the love of freedom than my parents. So when they finally, so ironically, they left West Germany in January 57 and made it to New York to Ellis Island. Their check-in was relatively easy compared to the immigration issues now. But yeah, my dad was already a doctor. Mom was a med student. She never got to go back, unfortunately. She had to work doing research in Boston when my dad was redoing his residency and learning English, by the way. That so I can't imagine how hard that was. He was taking, elementary school and high school English
Yeah.
while trying to redo his residency, and mom's working in research to get by. But they loved it. They loved Boston. When my dad finished his training about 1960, there were no jobs in Boston, so they ended up in Detroit. Detroit was thriving at the time, and went from there. And by the 70s, by the time they wrote his autobiography, they were doing very well. They were traveling, they were meeting new people, friends, fellow Holocaust survivors, and like I said, people from all over the world: Christians, Jews, Greeks, Poles, Hungarians, Israelis, Indians, you name it. I mean, they embraced everybody's culture, and I'm taking a page off of that by doing this too. I'm trying to get
Very.
people to
Yeah.
like each other for who they are, and even more so from being from a not less so, more so, so that you create more interest and we
Mm.
can engage and learn about each other's cultures. So
Very
that
interesting.
that's the lesson, and they loved it, and I don't, it was worth risking their lives. I think is how they felt, and they weren't the only ones. So a lot of people were willing to take the risk rather than being persecuted the rest of their lives.
Mm. Why do you think the experience of Hungarian Jews are often less discussed than other Holocaust narratives?
Well, that's a good question too. I mean, the Soviet Union got hit hard, Ukraine, Poland, and soon, and not far behind was Hungary, just because they had a big Jewish population. Um, the Jews in the late 19th century got treated fairly well. They integrated well with society. So somehow things changed after the turn of the century. Um, I don't know. Like I said, in Europe, probably a lot more people know about the history of Hungary through all of that, and obviously in Hungary and Eastern Europe. But in the United States, we learn, and probably India too. We learn our own history, and it's enough material as it is. We're about to celebrate our 250th birthday, and the United States has had a lot of history since then, and India probably even way before then. It's an old country, and
Yeah.
I only know about Gandhi and what happened after Gandhi. So, and Gandhi is a hero of mine too, by the way. So,
Okay.
I guess a lot of people don't know. I know most of my friends that have read the book didn't know about Hungarian history, and like I said, neither did I. And it gripped me. It brought me in. It enticed me to learn more about it. And that's my little corner of the world. It's just to talk about our little segment of anti-Semitism, our little segment of hatred and persecution, and how it doesn't matter where you are. It's just a bad apple. It's bad for society.
Mm.
All this technology we have, all these advancements we're making in medicine, science, space travel, it doesn't mean anything if people are still being persecuted, if they can't come
Mm.
along.
Mm. What lessons from your father's life have shaped your own values and your career?
Well, my career, he's my hero since, well, ninth grade as far as medicine. When I
Yeah.
was in ninth grade, I knew I wanted to go to medical school. And that was just
Mm.
watching my dad's love of medicine. He'd go take me when went on rounds. He'd take me to lunch. I'd wait in the doctor's lounge while he did his rounds. But he'd walk in through the ER and say hi to everybody, the doctors, the nurses, the secretaries, the janitors. He was just great to everybody. And I just loved how he treated people and how much he loved the science and the medicine of it. He always used to tell me, don't do it for the money, with his Hungarian accent. Don't do it, Robbie. Don't do it for the money. Do it because you love it. and that lesson carries on. Writing a book.
Yeah,
You're a prolific author. Congratulations. I mean, I'm sure you love doing it. You wrote
correct.
10 books. It's unbelievable. Congratulations.
Thank
But I
you.
know you're doing it. Nobody just does. I mean, we want to make a little money on it. We want to, and for me, some of my money is going to the Holocaust Museum. So it's a win-win. If I sell books, people are getting educated at other places too.
True.
Uh, no, yeah, I mean, it's just it goes on and on. But yeah, my dad was a role model, ninth grade, and I went into radiology, not OBGYN. I wasn't crazy about that specialty, but
Mm,
a legitimate specialty. Made a lot of people happy, and I just couldn't do I couldn't do anything else. I mean, a professional
yes.
athlete, professional musician, a sports announcer, all that stuff. I wanted to do, but the truth of the matter is, it's easier to get into med school than it
Yeah,
is to play wide receiver for the Detroit Lions or to make the England FA to make the England World Cup team. It's
incredible.
just the way it is. It's also
Incredible.
easier to get into med school than it is to be a New York Times bestseller, let alone
Yes.
sell 100,000 or a million books. I mean,
Yeah,
it's a fickle business, as you know. So,
absolutely. Absolutely. Rob, I've time for two more questions. In a world still marked by conflict, intolerance, and political divisions, what lessons from your book are most relevant today?
well, so the song remains the same. I probably already said that. But what happened 60, 80, 100 years ago in our story is still going on now. The sad thing is that people find new ways to persecute, to maim, to kill, to torture each other, and new ways to destroy each other in which I can't get my arms around because being in medicine, being a radiologist, we love the beauty of the cell, the beauty of the human anatomy, and the beauty, just the beauty of, and not just humans, dogs, cats, giraffes, the way things are put together. And
Mm,
these people wouldn't think twice of beheading somebody or cutting off their private parts or setting people on fire. They don't think twice about, we're human beings. We're
yeah,
we're we're not just people occupying space. We've got something to say. We've got somebody to love, and that's one lesson. And what happened to my dad could happen to any one of us. People don't. It could be a bad neighbor. It could be a bad business deal. Local government, federal government, foreign government, natural disaster. We could find ourselves homeless on the run, not knowing where our meals coming from. And we have homelessness as a problem here in Florida, and I feel badly for these people. It gives me a different insight because they've got, and I can't fight all our problems here. I'm just doing the anti-Semitism thing, but distracted driving and homelessness and poverty, starvation, those are legitimate problems that still need to be tackled. But
absolutely.
but for me, yeah, the lessons are clear, and cut it out. Let's work together. Let's love our neighbor. Volunteer somewhere, spend time with your family, give back to the community, write a book, write a play, write an opera, go to the museum, travel. Spend more time with your family. That
Correct.
that kind of thing instead of protesting and calling for the death of the Jews and death of Israel in the United States. That doesn't get anybody anywhere.
Absolutely.
It's just a
Absolutely.
waste
I
of time.
completely agree. Completely agree. And my last question for you, Rob. If your father could speak directly to young people around the world today, after everything he witnessed and survived, what do you think he would tell them about courage, freedom, and the responsibility of remembering history?
Well, he would just say exactly what you just said. I mean, first of all, he wrote the book. And he wrote the book for me, but I think he wrote it for the general population. I mean, he wrote this book with my mom as though they knew I was going to do this. And
Mm,
believe me, if you knew me 8 years ago, you see, this guy would never be writing about the Holocaust. And and they knew I would. And don't you hate it when your parents are right? I mean, I guess that's the funny thing. But everything in the book he would be telling these people. Of course, how do you put a man's life into 400 pages or into a half an hour podcast, or a eulogy? You just can't. But yeah, he would say, be careful of what you wish for. And I'm not getting political. I don't like this right side of the aisle, left side of the aisle. I wish we were more cohesive. I'm sure you've got split parties in India. I don't know much about India
absolutely.
politics. They've got it in Israel. They've got it all over South
Yeah.
Africa. Uh, but he would warn against being complacent about hatred, being complacent about anti-Semitism and genocide, and realize that we've got a little, very, very short time on this planet. He
Mm,
used to say to me all the time, "Enjoy every moment,
correct.
enjoy." And he used to say when I would sit back out in my back porch and get a little sunbathing, hanging out with my dog, and he would just say, sit back here, nobody's bothering you. And that's what he would say to the young people. And I'm sending this message. I've been called my dad's messenger, I suppose. I got the zap, and I'm saying these, get your head out of your, what, pay attention to this world, be a better person, and it starts from home. Educate your kids about peace and tolerance, and it'll go a long way. and read the damn book, and we're working on a documentary, by the way. So hopefully that circulates people back to the book because, videos are strong. Videos have strong messages.
Absolutely.
And
Absolutely.
I've got a good team helping me with that. So,
Fantastic.
you can't say
Yeah,
enough. I mean,
thank you.
it's another hour discussion. It's a 2 hour discussion, but cut the crap, my dad would say in three short words, cut the crap.
Absolutely. And on that note, Rob, I just want to say what a fascinating discussion this one has been. I'm always inspired when I speak to another author. And in the case of Not a Real Enemy, they're like two authors, your dad and you. Thank you for speaking to me about your own journey, about your dad's journey, and the incredible pieces of your book you have shared with my viewers and listeners. I have a very close YPO friend who's also Hungarian Jewish, extremely successful now when he is based in Australia. But he was telling me his father, when he and his father and mother moved from Hungary to Australia, the father was so thin that he had to be fed with a dropper. So, I mean, I've heard some of these stories. I've been to, um, you know, Auschwitz-Birkenau. I've seen the
Oh, it's hard.
horrors. I know what death is. We had some of the worst migrations between India and Pakistan. Over 1 million people died that year. But you're so right. I think I'm not sure why humanity doesn't allow each one of us to live and let live. Thank you for
I,
sharing me with your story, your dad's story, and the story of Not a Real Enemy. Thank you again.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Please tell your Hungarian friends, tell everybody about, let's do some more podcasts and book presentations. And I'd love to visit India someday. It's still on the bucket list. Had an
Absolutely.
office manager from India last year for a while, and great guy too. So thank you for having me. Not a real enemy. That was my dad. That's all of us. Uh, Feedback welcome. Please help me fight anti-Semitism. I can't do it alone.
Absolutely. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Brand Called You videocast and podcast, a platform that brings you knowledge, experience, and wisdom of hundreds of successful individuals from around the world. Do visit our website www.tbcy.in to watch and listen to the stories of many more individuals. You can also follow us on YouTube, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. Just search for the Brand Called You.